Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got another great show for you today. What else would we have? It is Thursday, I believe. Is that correct, Lindsey?
Yes, it's Thursday. The days feel like a long blah this week, like it's just a bunch in a row. But I'm sure the radar is going to make it feel like a new day. So tell us what's on it.
Let's get right to it. Columbia University was once again the site of a standoff between students and protesters and the administration. Mass protesters occupied the campus's library yesterday, rushing past security guards. Their desire was to call attention to the plight of Palestinians and to condemn what they believe are the atrocities being committed by Israel. They're doing so, once again, using tactics that turn off most people. Authorities instructed these protesters to show their IDs and be ejected if they were not students. Let's watch some of this.
Please stop pushing, please! You don't want this! Nobody wants this! Please stop pushing, we will let you leave! We will let you leave! Please take your ID card out!
Now, indeed, some of the Columbia protesters in the past have been outside agitators. It is appropriate for university officials to stop them from taking over campus. In fact, this is a good time to remind everybody what rights protesters do and do not have at Columbia and elsewhere. Now, it is perfectly valid to protest in the outdoor public spaces in campus by holding signs, conducting rallies, etc. It is not okay, however, to permanently occupy the public outdoor spaces by setting up tent cities and refusing to leave. And then when it comes to the indoor protesting, well, this is obviously subject to much more stringent rules. Now, this may come as a surprise to the protesters, but people are actually using the library to, study for their exams. It's actually the main purpose of being a Columbia student, not confuse self-defeating political activism, but, studying. So it probably isn't okay to occupy the library and disrupt the activities of the students who are using it. Pro-Palestinian activists do not get to monopolize public spaces and make it impossible for other people to make use of the educational function of the university. This should be obvious, but for some reason, it is not obvious to everyone. Now again, if students are merely engaging in anti-Israel or pro-Palestinian activism, expression, and speech, they have every right to do that, as long as they aren't obstructing anyone else. Neither Columbia's administration nor the Trump administration should take aggressive measures to deter anti-Israel speech. Speech is protected by the First Amendment. The pro-Israeli cause does not suffer from a lack of defenders. Let people who want to use their speech to oppose what the anti-Israel people are saying go that route. Now, after the protesters refused to disperse, Columbia called the NYPD for help, and the library was finally cleared. Dozens were arrested, over 70 people. Two public safety officers were injured. Interim Columbia President Claire Shipman said the actions of the protesters were totally unacceptable and that those who are students would be facing disciplinary measures. Well, that's welcome news. It is time for elite university campuses to get serious. Protesters are welcome to voice their opinions in open outdoor spaces. They cannot occupy buildings and force the rest of the campus to play by their rules. And I'm getting sick of this, and I think probably most of the rest of the country is, and it has nothing to do with pro-Israel or anti-Israel. I fully support the right of people to have differing opinions about this and express those opinions and be raucous and be outdoors and be, very fired up about this issue. It is something that causes a lot of passion. That's fine. I don't agree with the Trump administration trying to dictate Columbia's own speech policies. The speech policies should be consistent with the First Amendment. That does not mean you get to storm the library and take it over. That's obviously ridiculous. It's also self-defeating for the entire cause. I don't know what they think. It's getting to be like the crazy environmentalist people who throw soup at paintings. What are you doing? No one likes this.
That one I don't love. I think this is a little different. I think protests are disruptive. They disrupt education, but they also can be a form of education. You learn about cultural, civic engagement, different experiences people have, they're passionate about. And that's what college is. You know that it's a learning experience, but it also is so much more. A place where you can share ideas and see how passion turns into change. And historically, there are many examples of actual times that this worked, when like sit-ins during the civil rights movement, right? They're in buildings, sitting in, but it led to major legislation and change. And so I think we can't forget that at college campuses like Columbia University in 1968 over the Vietnam War, The result of that, when they were occupying the campus and causing a ruckus, was basically that they stopped classified military research and military recruitment, and the university agreed to that. So I think when you think about the point of people doing this and why they're being so disruptive, is because they didn't want to be there and whisper and stay out the way and maybe do it on the lawn. Like, they want to say, okay, this is finals time, this is inconvenient, but it's also inconvenient to continue to watch this play out in a way that we as the protesters don't agree with.
There is research on, you're right, civil organized protesting that is not violent and that does not involve destruction of property can be effective, according to social psychology research. You're right to bring up that history of protesting. I think with the Vietnam example, it gets a little confusing, because while you're right that the massive protesting on campuses did contribute to, Johnson, the sitting president, failed in his re-election effort because the war was so unpopular. I think that's true. At the same time, it did end up, the beneficiary was Richard Nixon, who wanted to crack down on, empower police and crack down on protesting, and did negotiate an end to the Vietnam War. So it starts to get a little confusing. There was I think a backlash among ordinary Americans against the protesters, even though ordinary Americans were with public opinion, the shifting tide against the Vietnam War. So it gets a little confusing. I think on this issue, if you're watching what the masked students storming the library, refusing to disperse, throwing a tantrum in
the
public.
president is threatening them with not only trying to put them in jail, but to remove them from having access to their college education that they paid for. This is crazy because, like you said, free speech is really important, and really important to all Republicans most of the time.
It's crazy.
So I don't really understand why Trump is going so far after.
If you shove past the security, I mean, we gotta, all of us in all of society now gotta go through metal detectors to get into any public building. If if I jump the line in the airport and say, oh, I'm protesting, I don't like Israel, it's not, I don't get to get away with that. Why do they get to get away with it?
Right. I think that they, like you said, when people get hurt or anybody gets hurt, that's a
Yeah.
big deal, right? To me, I never want to see that happen. All I'm saying is that historically, when people are, like the majority of the people that we saw were standing around, voicing their opinion, voicing their thoughts, and the world stopped down.
In the library.
Called attention to it, right? It was a place where it's going to create shock, it's going to create press coverage, it's going to reverberate around the world. Mm-hmm. And the point of protesting and being so passionate and putting your heart on the line in that way for a cause where if they're taking your ID, you could get thrown out of school at this point because it's so contentious right now.
You will get thrown out of school. I don't know what you're doing.
But that to me, that's not okay, because a school is for much more. It's where you learn how to really get on the side of things that you enjoy, learn how to speak up about those things. You learn so much more in college than just actually reading a textbook. And I think this is going to be a great.
You're going to learn what the rules about protesting on campus are. That's what these people are about to learn
about. You can't throw them out.
They can be thrown. I mean, they are if you violate the policy of the university. Now, the policies should comport with the First Amendment and should allow for protesting, and do allow for protesting, again, in public outdoor spaces, maybe in multi-use indoor spaces as well. But you can't occupy the library indefinitely.
But
That's
I mean,
just
like,
obvious. No one can.
Sit-ins in spaces that are not public.
Well, I know, but all those people all got disciplined as well.
No,
they
I
were just
understand,
willing to be disciplined because they thought the cause was so important.
Right, and so perhaps we didn't speak to all the protesters there. Perhaps
Yeah.
they're willing to be disciplined, but we know for sure that sitting, standing in public places and private places that you're not supposed to be in, that are not all outdoors. I mean, in a perfect world, yeah, we'd protest right here in the park. That's open. It's a nice day. But, protesting is inconvenient. Nobody who's protesting wants there to continuously be a war between Israel and Hamas. They want this to end and figure out how to bring hostages home. They want this to end and to figure out how people can stop continuously dying by the thousands every day in Gaza. And I think that if that's the goal, then it has to be a little inconvenient. I mean,
well, I want that too. I don't see any connection between what these activists are doing and an end to the war coming any more.
Sometimes it's not a linear exact line, but speaking up about it definitely causes action. You have to agree with that.
I don't necessarily agree with that, but speaking
not gonna
up
give it
about
to
it, what these people are doing is a little different than that. But we can agree to disagree, as we usually do.
Next up, Republican Senator Thom Tillis is in hot water from his own fellow conservatives.
Republican Thom Tillis is catching heat from people on the right. Tillis told reporters this week he would not be voting for President Trump's pick to be the D.C. U.S. Attorney.
That pick is a man by the name of Ed Martin. Tillis is against Martin's nomination because of his advocacy for January 6 defendants. Tillis said, quote, "If Mr. Martin were being put forth as a U.S. attorney for any district except the district where January 6 happened, the protest happened, I'd probably support him, but not this district."
Martin's argument is that some J6ers were over-prosecuted. A no vote from Tillis means Martin won't advance, would lead to an 11-11 deadlock in the Senate Judiciary Committee, since Republicans have a 12-10 majority.
Trump responded to the matter this week. Let's listen.
Well, it's disappointing because, I know Eddie's very talented. Crime is down in Washington, D.C. That's really up to the senators. If they, feel that way, they have to vote the way they vote. They have to follow their heart, and they have to follow their mind.
Executive Director of the Foundation for Freedom Online, Mike Benz, wrote on X, "People are not appreciating the magnitude of the Ed Martin situation. The prosecutor is on the top of the FBI. He runs all D.C. criminal investigations. He is the choke point for D.C.'s worst secrets. If Ed Martin is blocked and Boasberg picks, Trump 2.0's momentum would be totally paralyzed." This is a very interesting developing situation on the right. So Thom Tillis, Republican senator from North Carolina, is one of the more, I don't know what word you want to use, moderate or independent or
conservative, like that.
I would definitely not use that word, but maybe you would use that word. More at odds with Trump than anyone else just about in the Republican coalition, and has announced that he will not support Ed Martin, who is the choice for this D.C. attorney role. This is a very pivotal role, as Mike Benz points out, because this person is in charge of a lot of D.C.-based prosecutions, which end up involving the federal government, because that's where the federal government is headquartered, is Washington, D.C. This will paralyze what Trump people are arguing. A lot of the work that the Trump administration wants to do to clean up the deep state and so forth. And there's going to be a lot of fury at Tillis for torpedoing this pick, as he seems to have done. Without his vote, Ed Martin cannot be confirmed to this appointment, which will really sabotage the agenda.
Hats off to Tillis. That was a brilliant, brilliant move. But I think, seriously, you cannot drain the swamp. That's what Trump and MAGA want to do, drain the swamp, by replacing it with conspiracy theorists. So even if you agree that these legacy, older people in Congress, moderate people, traditional conservatives, like I like to call them, are sticking to the script that MAGA base doesn't like, you can't add people who are railing off about things that are not true, protecting, January 6th people. I know
January 6th people don't deserve a trial, a defense.
I think
we're against.
I'm against bashing violence, bashing officers' heads in. I'm against all that.
Too.
Right, so these people were there, and he wants to blanket pardon them. He actually riled them up on January 5th at the Stop the Steal rally. I know you know that, and told them, things like, let's go forward, and was ramping up the crew to stop at no means and things like this. And now you want him in charge of that same district? That seems absurd. I'm happy that it wasn't for any other district either, because I just don't think he's somebody who should be in charge with this type of behavior.
In his private capacity, he served as this is my understanding at least, a defense counsel for some prosecuted January 6 individuals. I think everyone deserves due process and the presumption of innocence and the right to an attorney. I mean, going back to our founding, John Adams defended the British troops who committed the Boston Massacre, because he believed that even people who were believed to have committed some odious crime deserved a defense and deserved their day in trial. So I don't think that makes you a conspiracy theorist to say that, or to say that some of them were overcharged. I mean, the guy who came in with the MAGA horns person,
he likened the Capitol Hill riot to Mardi Gras.
He likened it to Mardi confinement.
He likened it to Mardi Gras.
Well,
That's what he said.
I'm sure I don't agree with every way that it's been characterized.
Is it like Mardi Gras when people were hurt, severely hurt? And
99% of the people there were engaged in not a cause I agree with, but in First Amendment protected speech and activism in the outdoor space. It was a minority of people who entered the Capitol. I believe that people who committed trespassing should have been charged for that with very light sentences, because it's not a significant thing. People who committed violence against police officers should have been charged and were charged with serious crimes. I didn't agree with the decision to do a blanket pardon for everyone involved. I would have pardoned people who got egregiously long sentences who had committed no violent crime. Certainly, it's not all of them. I wouldn't have pardoned all of them. So I didn't agree with that tactic. Neither did Kash Patel, by the way. He said at his confirmation hearing, yeah, he didn't agree with the blanket pardon for all of them. J.D. Vance said the same. So, I think there's still room to think that the zeal with which the January 6th participants were pursued by the government was extreme. Even though, yes, there was significant. I'm not denying that there was significant wrongdoing and criminality committed. But they're still entitled to a defense. But that's something liberals believe in.
If the Republicans are the party, they believe in law and order. This is absurd that they want to put this man in office. You know what I mean? In a position like this.
I actually want people who believe in defense to be in.
This is common sense. This is just common sense. I mean, there's other Republicans that if they had a little bit more courage would stand up and say this is not appropriate either. We know that he can't get through with the votes, like Lisa Murkowski, Collins, McConnell. These are all people that have been vocal about their feelings on January 6th. So like, there's not overwhelming support for all January 6th offenders, by Republicans blanket wide. I think people are just more scared to speak up for Trump. And I'm happy that Tillis actually did it and was the first person to say, listen, we don't have to always be in lockstep and blindly support your lead if your leadership is not getting us to the right goal, which is making sure that people that deserve to be in positions and are capable and are going to do the job best
this is what I don't understand.
should be in that position.
This is what I don't understand from liberals. I thought it was a good thing to have people in top law enforcement, prosecutorial, investigatory roles who have some sympathy for and familiarity with the defense side of all of this.
You know how to spin.
That's a good thing. Because as a civil libertarian who supports due process and the rights of the accused and thinks our criminal justice system is overly punitive, I think that is a good thing.
I don't think.
And it's been a liberal left position for forever, that there's too much, that there's over sentencing, that the law enforcement has too much at its disposal, all of that.
Yeah, I just think when you look at January 6th, that was a very low moment for our country, and everyone pretty much with eyes should see that we don't want, our capital to look like that, to feel like that experience to ever happen again. And so the fact that he wants to campaign on the idea that everyone there is free of charge and was overcharged and agrees with the blanket pardon that most people do not agree with, even Republicans. It's kind of absurd to have him in a serious
We'll have to wrap in a minute, but the conservative response to that is it doesn't matter because Democrats stood by and endorsed widespread rioting in every city in America because of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter. So it is a selective concern about this one instance on January 6th when there was tons of rioting and looting and destruction and violence and crime that was excused by the Democratic Party. And so
we're going to have to talk about this later. We got to bring this back up.
The conservatives. All right, remember Kamala's infamously edited 60 Minutes interview? Well, it was nominated for an Emmy. You can imagine that Trump had a response.
Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
We're not going to stop pursuing what is necessary for the United States to be clear about where we stand on the need for this war to end.
Remember that 60 Minutes interview? Well, it's up for an Emmy. Guess who's not too happy about it? President Trump wrote a lengthy post on Truth Social calling it a total slap in the face and also saying, quote, "Did 60 Minutes and its corporate parents apply to get an Emmy for an illegally falsified interview, or did other fake outlets nominate them for this dubious honor? That interview has also been the subject of a lawsuit from the president. He says it was deceptively edited."
CBS has called the suit baseless and vowed to defend against it. And even some big Democratic names have now gotten involved. According to Semaphore, Senator Bernie Sanders led a group that sent a letter directly to Paramount asking them not to bow down to Trump, saying in part, quote, "We urge you and the board of directors at Paramount to make it clear to President Trump today that Paramount will not surrender to his attack on the First Amendment."
I find that very interesting that this is what is so exercising Bernie Sanders today. Look, I don't agree, as I've said many times, with the lawsuit over the 60 Minutes interview. I don't think it was edited in such a way that it was like libelous toward Trump of all. It doesn't even concern Trump. That said, it was badly edited in my view. They in the one we just played, that was the edited version, where it looked like Kamala Harris responded immediately to a question about what has the Biden administration actually done to pressure Benjamin Netanyahu to make a different choice in Gaza. And it sounded like she had a quick answer. Now, it wasn't a very, very good answer, actually. But in the real clip, she paused for a long period of time before she came up with that not compelling answer at all. I think it is an important pause because she didn't have an answer, and she clearly took time to think of one and still couldn't come up with it, because the reality is the Biden administration, which she was a part of, actually did not put any pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu to do something different in Gaza, or if they did, he just ignored them. And that's an important issue. That's clearly something that people in the Democratic coalition were concerned about. Harris lost tons of Arab American voters in my home state of Michigan over this issue. So I think it was consequential that she didn't have an answer, that they covered for her not having an answer, and it's going to win an Emmy. I do think that's a slap in the face. I agree with Donald Trump completely on that aspect of it.
I disagree completely, and I think that a pause in a moment doesn't mean that someone doesn't have an answer, because we cannot get in the brain of someone. We actually don't know what that means. She provided an answer, and if they got to it quicker, 60 Minutes might have a 10-minute block. You know how blocking in shows work. That's when you have to get in and out. But not to get people into the weeds of what they didn't ask to get in the weeds of.
Well, I think it's worth being in the weeds here.
I think that Trump is interesting. His Truth Social post said, this is a threat to the truth. And I don't understand how he has the nerve to be so up in arms about being a threat to the truth when this man has told the most lies probably of any president of all time. I mean, the Washington Post, which is hardly considered a liberal outlet, said that he lied 30,000 times during his first term. That's an average of 21 times a day. Okay, over a term. So how can you have the nerve and the gall to say that you think that they are lying by cutting out a breath when you actually make things up, most recent as yesterday, saying that, we are having conversations with China, and China's saying we haven't had one. They're having their first one in Switzerland, I think today or tomorrow. So he just makes things up. He acts like there's ongoing conversations with China while we're in the middle of trying to figure out our finances. This man just makes stuff up often, and he's mad about a breath of air that Kamala took.
Kamala Harris just makes stuff up. Again, there was no answer. I mean, tell me what the answer was. Point me to the example where the Biden administration said,
but her
do not
having
take
an answer
this
is not,
action,
that didn't,
and Netanyahu
You still feel like her answer was unsatisfactory, so the point is, how did it change the interview? How is it worth a lawsuit? How is it worth so much commotion?
I didn't say it's worth a lawsuit. I don't think it's worth a lawsuit.
It's not worth even the commotion.
I don't think it's worth an award. They botched the edit of an interview to go softer on Kamala Harris, and they're being awarded for it. This speaks to what I said earlier this week about the Pulitzers, that there's no prize for that really fantastic reporting, exposing for all the world to see that Joe Biden is not mentally competent to finish out his term, let alone be president for another 4 years. There's no reporting to award on that because no one did any.
But you can't get mad because you don't win the prize. Like, this is what a non-objective group, there's a group of people that choose based on certain standards. So if the editing is really down to the meticulous way that the colors were put in there and the editors put everything, the colorists spent their time. These are hardworking people that did a great job on the edit in their humble opinion. And so Trump has no say over this. He can't control everything. If it doesn't go Trump's way, it goes no way. That's not how life goes. And you should have learned that around 5.
The interview itself was fine. The way it was conducted was fine. The editing of it softened Kamala Harris. And we now know, I don't think I'm a conspiracy theorist for wondering if there was not a deliberate attempt by the mainstream media at so many different levels to cover for the deficiencies of Biden and Harris for fear of reelecting Trump.
Trump had an opportunity.
That's certainly what it looks like to me.
Trump had an opportunity to also go on 60 Minutes, and he was far in the process of going on there for his own interview, and he said no because they told him that they were going to fact check things that he said, like they did with Kamala, right? So the anchor comes on.
No, the fact checking
yes,
was
they do.
not equivalent
and so it just,
whatsoever.
He wouldn't come on because he doesn't like to tell the truth, but he's telling her to tell the truth.
No, because they're going to interrupt it. Whenever
he's telling CBS and 60 Minutes to tell the truth, but he didn't want to go to 60 Minutes himself because he didn't want them to correct it.
The moderating at not the first debate, the CNN debate, the Trump-Biden debate, that one was moderated by Jake Tapper and Dana Bash expertly. They did a fantastic job. I have no notes for them. They did not interrupt. There should not be real-time fact-checking in the debates. That's for the candidates to do to each other. The subsequent debate with Trump and Harris, yes, they were fact-checking things Trump said correctly, things that he said that were inaccurate.
But not the
they did not do the same thing to her, even though she also said things that were inaccurate. She said there was no
it's
troops
not a debate. I'm
in
talking
combat positions.
I'm talking
and
about
it's not
60
true.
minutes, an edited episode.
Yeah.
They're going to edit it, and they're going to tell you if he said a lie, and that should be appropriate.
They edited it badly. I can't believe you wouldn't throw in the towel on that one. It was badly. I wasn't saying it should be sued over. I'm just saying it was badly edited and doesn't deserve an award.
All right, we got to get out of this one. Up next, a couple of Trump supporters say they've received death threats after voting for the president, and they're fighting back.
Conservative legal group has come to the rescue of a couple Trump supporters who allegedly received death threats for supporting Trump in the 2024 election.
Pennsylvania citizens Robert Butwin Jr. and Janet Schmidt claim to have gotten menacing letters in the mail containing violent threats against them and their families for displaying pro-Trump signs in their yards.
PILF lodged a legal complaint in the beginning of May on their behalf, maintaining that the letters violate voter intimidation prohibitions under the Voting Rights Act and the Ku Klux Klan Acts. Here to break it all down is J. Christian Adams, president of Public Interest Legal Foundation, the group leading this lawsuit. Welcome to Rising.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to speak with you. Can you give us more details on how these threats take place, what exactly happened, and how you believe this could actually violate the law?
Yeah, dozens of people, not just our two plaintiffs, got letters in October threatening them with death, and they were going to be visited in the dead of night, is what the letter said. I mean, literally, it's a letter that was sent in the mail, and that their family was being watched, that they're on a database, and they will shoot their cat and more. That is literally what the letter said. And so these people got these letters. In America, you can't send letters like this threatening to kill people because they support Donald Trump. And it's amazing that whoever sent them had to visit the houses, right? Because they staked it out to find people who had Trump signs. And these letters went out to dozens of people across Pennsylvania in October, just before the election.
So why pursue this case now? Are you seeing a rise in, voter choice retaliation?
Well, there's a number of reasons why. We were hoping that after the election that somebody would be arrested. I mean, the U.S. Postal Inspection Service has the letters. Hopefully, the Pennsylvania State Police do. I know that the local police do. And you would have thought they would have figured this out. But I guess Inspector Clouseau is working for the postal inspectors, and nobody's been arrested. That's why we're offering a $2,000 reward for any information about the identity. In the meantime, we're in federal court. We filed a complaint in federal court as a placeholder, and we're going to go to the postal inspectors and say, give us your record so we can go find these people.
So how does this relate to election law? Because, right, if you send threatening letters over the mail, that's a crime regardless of, what the issue pertains to. It doesn't have to be specifically because of political reason or anything. You can't, threaten to kill people or make reports of that kind of nature, but you're saying there's a specific election provision that that would probably enhance the charges or something of that matter. Can you go into more detail there?
Yes. Section 11B of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 is an anti-intimidation provision. I brought cases when I was at the Justice Department against the new Black Panther Party in Philadelphia using the same exact provision of law. There's also the Klan Act, the KKK Act of 1871, which says you can't conspire to intimidate people who want to exercise their right to vote. So we brought a case under both of these federal civil rights statutes to defend the Trump voters from the death threats that they received in the mail.
And what's the ultimate goal in this case? Are you seeking compensation, deterrence, and what would be the ideal outcome?
Well, the ideal outcome is this joker, whoever sent them, or jokers, to be in federal prison. That's what we really want, because you shouldn't be doing this in America. We don't threaten people based on who they want to vote for. The other thing we'd like to see is a deterrence. Like you said, we want people to know that they should feel safe when they want to put a political sign out, when they want to vote for somebody. That in other countries this happens, but not in America. It is not American to send death threats to people because they support Donald Trump. That isn't what we stand for. And we want Americans to know that they'll be protected if they want to exercise their free speech.
I have to imagine if the situation was the reverse, if it was Kamala Harris supporters receiving threatening correspondence in the mail, presumably from right-wing crazy people or crazy MAGA people, it would be a national story. It would be talked about in mainstream media constantly. Are you getting the same level of attention for this example of voter intimidation?
Well, you're exactly right. It should be a national news story if Harris voters got threatening letters in the mail. It should be a national news story if a cross gets burned in someone's yard because they have a Harris sign in the yard. And it should be if a Trump voter is threatened with death. But unfortunately, we all know the answer as to why that doesn't happen. It's because these are Trump supporters. It's not a national news story. And that's the problem with places like the mainstream media, the New York Times, CBS News, all of the familiar people who don't care about Trump voters getting death threats because it doesn't fit their narrative. But that can't bog us down. We've got to do what we can do to fix it.
Jay Christian Adams, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Next up, were the Democrats doomed to fail last November? Former President Biden seems to think so. We'll discuss. Stay with us. Former President Joe Biden says it wouldn't have mattered if he had dropped out of the presidential race earlier.
The former commander-in-chief is giving rare insight into that decision in his first one-on-one interview since leaving the White House. Here's what he had to say.
Should you have withdrawn earlier, given someone else a bigger chance?
I don't think it would have mattered. I meant what I said when I started, that I think I'm prepared to hand this to the next generation. It's a transition government. But things moved so quickly that it made it difficult to walk away.
Biden also highlighted that he handed Harris, quote, a fully funded campaign. But Biden's reasons for dropping out, a mere 106 days before Election Day, didn't sit well with Fox and Friends host Brian Kilmeade, who had this to say.
What, are you kidding me? You worked an hour a day. You had plenty of time to reflect and say, this is the perfect moment to get out and to finish off in 4 years and try to end up on a high note and let this thing fight out. Also, what does it say? Does he think about Kamala Harris? If I gave her more time, she had plenty of money, she still wouldn't have won?
Yeah. Meanwhile, Trump administration officials are taking aim at Biden himself of the interview. In a post on X, White House Communications Director Stephen Chung called Biden a disgrace, saying, quote, he has clearly lost all mental faculties and his handlers thought it'd be a good idea for him to do an interview and incoherently mumble his way through every answer. Sadly, this feels like abuse. That is an incredible line from Joe Biden that I don't think it would have mattered if you'd gotten out earlier. I'm sorry, that is total BS. Maybe it wouldn't have changed the outcome. We don't know that for sure, but with a lot more time, the Democrats could have had an actual primary, and you could have had perhaps a stronger candidate than Kamala Harris prevail. I'm not saying that's the most likely outcome. I think probably Kamala Harris would have won a primary, but she was a weaker candidate than expected when she herself ran for the Democratic nomination in the 2020 cycle. She didn't even make it to the finish line. Some additional weaknesses could have emerged, and you could have had someone else, rise to the top and perhaps do better. Or it could still be Kamala Harris, but she would have had more time to roll out her message or maybe strategize or distance herself from Biden or pick different advisors. She got stuck with Biden's team, which was a real handicap because they wouldn't let her criticize him, even though it was clear she needed to distance herself from the toxically unpopular administration she was part of. But she didn't feel she had space to do that because the people advising her were Biden sycophants. So it is false to say that she couldn't have done more with more time. I don't see how you could possibly believe that.
Yeah, I am one of the biggest Biden critics of all time. I think that it was a disaster. I think he should have been a one-term president. He ran because people did not want to see Trump as president again at that time, and then he won because of that. And I think by year 2 and 3, there should have been a strategy, an exit strategy, instead of what I saw as an ego strategy to stay in. He just continued to say, I deserve to be here silently, and kept his circle even smaller, kicked people supposed to be his right and left-hand men and women out of the circle, and did a lot that I disagree with. Now, I also agree that in 2019, Kamala was not a strong candidate. And so naturally, Biden was in a situation where he took it so far and went so long that he could not skip over Kamala in that moment. That would be absurd and ridiculous to just pluck somebody out of oblivion. And not even oblivion. People have built careers for themselves, but skip over the woman who's second in charge and not put her to the forefront. So I think the whole thing was a disaster. But I'm confident that if she would have had more time and a way better strategy, then there should have been a plan. But even beyond that, I think if the Democrats would have had a strategy years before Biden left the office and said, I'm going to be a one-term president, which I know is extremely hard for somebody to decidedly do, and that's why not many presidents do it. They always try to run again. I think that they would have had a great candidate and possibly a strong argument outside of the argument that we're not Trump, because that argument didn't work at all. And so that's the biggest thing, is like, if we go back into this swing of trying to go back with the status quo, you're going to see the midterms have the same election and maybe a third term for Trump, which is not possible.
Right,
but,
and you're right that it is unusual for a president to commit to only serving one term, and to actually only serve one term. That would be frankly unprecedented in the modern era, but it was also unprecedented to have a candidate that was this old. He was in a unique position because of his advanced age. There were concerns about Reagan running for a second term in the 80s because he was older than other presidents had been up until that point, and he was way younger than Biden and way sharper than Biden, even by the end of his term, where people were saying, oh, maybe he has Alzheimer's or something. If you watch his Reagan's final press conference, I don't care what you think about him or if you think he has bad policies or something, but he is he's taking questions, he's going back and forth on a bunch of different subjects, he's taking questions on this aspect of foreign policy, this aspect of foreign policy. Doesn't mean you have to like or agree with him, but there's no evidence of like mental decline, and people were worried about his age. Biden's far older and can't get through a press briefing at all, and was still running to be president for another 4 years. It's insulting.
And I also
it's
think
insulting to her, frankly, what he just said there, right?
It is rude.
She wouldn't have. It wouldn't have mattered.
And I think they pulled all the stops, and they used all the old tricks that used to work, like getting a big star like Beyonce, like getting everybody famous to come. And back in the day,
they got Queen Latifah off the couch, right? Isn't that what
Queen Latifah's been doing a lot. That's my girl. She's not been on the couch. But I think that they pulled out all the celebrities, and with access to social media and the amount that we talk and communicate as a younger generation, and even my parents' generation and other, we don't get information from one source and somebody popular tells us what to look at and to decide. And so that's also a strategy that I would not advise. And now that I'm understanding 100%. More about that transition and the days, if Kamala had a different team around her and had more time, I think that it could have been a tighter race for sure. And I think if they would have planned for him not to run again, they could have had a home run. But they didn't do that, and hopefully they learned a lesson from this.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. She was saddled with a strategy that was not the optimal strategy for her, given the short amount of time she had. Because you can't just replace, it takes time to find the right people. And you can't just have someone not doing the campaign advisor role, not doing the fundraising role. You need people in those positions. So she was forced to just retain the people he was using. They were not the smartest people in the bunch.
But they raised a lot of money, so obviously
It raised a lot of money, but that's not everything, unfortunately, for the Democrats. Up next, Disney's latest announcement has led to a major backlash. Stick around. Disney is filled with hypocrisy. That's what many conservatives on X are saying.
The company announced that they were building a theme park resort in Abu Dhabi. Disney CEO Bob Iger said in a statement, quote, "This is a thrilling moment for our company as we announce plans to build an exciting Disney theme park in Abu Dhabi, whose culture is rich with appreciation of the arts and creativity."
There's just one problem. Abu Dhabi has strict anti-LGBTQ laws, and in 2022, then Disney CEO Bob Chapek spoke out against Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' ban on teaching gender ideology in Florida's elementary schools. Chapek wrote, "I called Governor DeSantis this morning to express our disappointment and concern that if the legislation becomes law, it could be used to unfairly target gay, lesbian, non-binary, and transgender kids and families." Many on the right were quick to point out this on X. Outkick writer Ian Miller wrote, Disney leadership dismantled Splash Mountain because it was racist, and have cast members say friends instead of ladies and gentlemen, but they're happily building a theme park in Abu Dhabi because they do not actually care about anything, only virtue signaling. Yeah.
Well, some of this is a non-factor because Bob Iger is the CEO again, and so therefore he makes new decisions as a CEO, right? The old CEO made those old decisions with Florida. But the other part that I think people are getting wrong is that Disney is actually licensing. I mean, a company, we're talking about a broadcast mostly company that in the broadcast industries are losing money, but a company is licensing out the theme park name to Morale Destinations, who's then going on to build out the park and invest in their community. And just like you might not like some of the laws of the land, the people there are really beautiful people. And so I don't think that that always mirrors. And I think that it's really amazing and fascinating that Americans always find time to condescend other nations about what they're doing wrong and right and what we're doing in partnership with them when we haven't got our stuff together in 52 years. UAE is 52 years old. So in 1776, think about where we were. We didn't even end slavery in 52 years after we were founded. This is a brand new country. Like, give them some break and some breathing room other than criticizing what their laws might be. And I know the criticism is mostly on Disney as a company, but the fact that they're working with a nation that's building itself and doing it in such a beautiful way, and I say that because I spent a lot of time there exploring through a travel series that I have, but I actually spent time with the culture and the people, and I think that to paint the picture as just this dictatorship and all this stuff is happening, well, in 1776, America looked real raggedy too with some of the things that we were doing, right, that we have atoned and tried to correct ourselves for. So let's stop acting like we can't do business with foreign nations as they gather themselves and create their new version of what society looks like as they grow. I mean, we just talked about Don't Ask, Don't Tell yesterday. We talked about how we have LGBTQ laws and they've changed. People weren't allowed to get have gay marriages under Obama. He changed his stance on that. Now he's very progressive on it. He wasn't in his first term. So these are all ways that people grow, experience life, change, and develop their laws, especially as a new nation.
So I actually agree with everything you just said. I would not criticize, if I was Disney, why I would let Abu Dhabi develop, just as you said. The progress happens over time. I don't think we should not do business with countries that have yucky human rights records, because everyone has problems, and then we would just, try having to be totally self-sufficient. And the process of market engagement is one means by which developing countries become more tolerant and prosperous and et cetera. It doesn't always happen. China has unfortunately not become as free and non-autocratic as we hoped it would be given engagement. But this has generally worked in Africa and even across the Middle East and in South America. So I agree with everything you just said. What conservatives are not mad that Disney is refusing to condemn Abu Dhabi, pointing out the hypocrisy of condemning Florida for the perceived anti-gay legislation of not having conversations in classrooms at a young age about gender and sexuality topics that conservative parents, or frankly just many parents, regardless of political ideology, don't think those things should be happening in the public school system. And Disney spoke out against that. So when you condemn a much lesser transgression, or we would debate whether it is even a transgression of LGBTQ non-discrimination, when you say something about that, but then you're happily doing business, having their cruise ships. When we talked about this on Rising years ago when it was happening, Disney was, speaking out against Republican Ron DeSantis, but not speaking out. Their cruises park in islands in the Caribbean where there's still, laws against same-sex relations. It just seems really hypocritical to me, and a lot of people, I think.
You know very well what we cannot control, and that's other countries. We have a democracy and a government that controls America. Mm-hmm. And so if we're in a country that is further along than many of the countries that you're discussing, then I think that it's fair to say that we are going to criticize us who have corrected and figured out how to live in a society where individuals are allowed to be individual and allow people to feel free to move around our world that way. And so as Americans, I think it's right to call out things that we don't like, and when we do business with each other as states and as a country. I think this is a huge deal because it's going to bring in a lot of money. The economy is not the best it's been. And so this is going to bring, like I said, they're licensing it out to Abu Dhabi, meaning a foreign country is now investing in the U.S., which will create jobs, I'm sure, over here to oversee that park and a lot of things. So it's a good thing. But we cannot say compare apples to oranges because we can't actually control other countries.
just shouldn't
So
have
we
said
shouldn't
anything
ban
about
doing
the-
business, but we should be able to say, hey, I'm a vocal critic of your stance on this, and I want to tell you it's a business that I own, right? I want to build here. I want to do this. Like, I think conservatives believe in serving certain people or not serving certain people. We've had this conversation. When you own a business, you can decide who to do business with, especially in America. But I think when you do business internationally, you have to be open-minded, understanding that the laws are different around the world. But the goal for America in those ventures, if it's not too egregious, is to make money, and that's the goal for our economy. And so you separate some of their personal laws.
I don't know. I think again, that part of it is fine, but I think a lot of people are turned off by the, oh yeah, well, we just, different cultures do different things, and that's okay, and who are we to judge when it comes to them?
No, it's not judging. It doesn't mean no one's judging.
Intolerance at home.
It means that at home we corrected this.
I mean, this
behavior.
reminds me of, you know what it reminds me of?
And so we should continue to correct it. No.
Years ago, I wrote about this. I just Googled it. 10 years ago, there was remember religious freedom protection bills in state. There were states to make it so that the religious bakery doesn't have to bake the cake, which I agree with. I don't think they should be required to do business with people they don't agree with. And there was Indiana back when this was back when Mike Pence was governor, before he was vice president. Indiana was going to have one of these laws, and a bunch of business announced they were not going to. They were going to de-headquarter from Indiana over this. But they were still headquartered at that time. This was before Obergefell, so gay marriage was still illegal in like 13 states, and they were still doing business in those states. So it doesn't even it doesn't make sense. You're pulling out of a state that, and Indiana did not have a ban on gay marriage. They were just saying religious accommodation for people who disagree with LGBTQ lifestyles, and businesses were pulling out of that, but staying in states that actually had gay marriage banned on the books. So my point is, when you start to involve yourself in political issues like this, you open yourself up to charges of hypocrisy. And I think it would everyone can do whatever they want, I don't care, but it would just behoove business leaders, especially important, large business leaders like the heads of Disney, to try not to get involved in divisive, narrow debates about politics. I think everyone prefers that. Stick to what you do best, which is not making good Star Wars movies. Although I'm very happy with Disney at the moment because I've been watching the second season of Andor, which is frickin' terrific.
10 out of 10?
It is so good. I can't even contain my enthusiasm for it. Maybe we'll talk about it more next week, because that does it for us today on... Oh, no. We've got another thing coming. Coming up, did Democrats fail to protect the press? Our next guest thinks so. Stay tuned. Democrats blew their opportunity to protect the press, according to the Intercept's Shawn Musgrave. He says before Trump's second term, Senate Democrats had the chance to pass the Press Act. The bill would have shielded journalists from being compelled to give up sources, records, and more.
And instead of codifying the bill, which unanimously passed in the House, they didn't, giving Trump's DOJ carte blanche to go after the press as they saw fit.
Joining us now to discuss how he says Democrats bungled their shot at shielding the press is Shawn Musgrave, media law attorney and counsel at The Intercept. Welcome to Rising.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Can you explain more of what the Press Act would have covered and why this opportunity was missed?
Sure. So the Press Act is part of a long-running attempt by press advocates to codify what's called a federal shield bill. So virtually every state has a law similar to this. It puts restrictions on how law enforcement could use things like subpoenas and search warrants against the press to figure out who their sources were. There have been prior versions of the Press Act, most recently last year, that, as you said, had passed unanimously in the House and then died in the Senate, unfortunately.
So in your thought process from researching this, I mean, Democrats have failed to codify Roe v. Wade and then complained about it. Now they're failing, you telling me they're failing to codify this law into law. And so how did we get here, and what is the strategy forward? Like, why do you think they keep missing these opportunities?
I have put that question to several Democratic senators' office and have not gotten a clear answer on what the strategy was and why it failed to pass, especially since one of the co-sponsors of the bill last year, Senator Durbin, was chair of the Judiciary Committee where the bill ultimately sat for several months without a hearing. So I'm not sure what the strategy is or was. Toward the end of the session last year, while the Democrats still had a majority, the lead sponsor of the bill, Senator Ron Wyden, brought it to the Senate floor on a last-ditch effort to get it passed on unanimous consent. It was quite predictably blocked by Senator Tom Cotton, Republican of Arkansas, who had done the same in the past. So, I mean, it was really kind of a rinse and repeat of what had happened in prior iterations, in that a single Republican was able to block a bill that had bipartisan support because the Democrats seemingly didn't really have a strategy to enact it on that bipartisan support. It's quite frustrating.
Could you give us more information about how it would work? Because while I presume I'm in obvious support of the goals of it as someone who supports press freedom and does not like government surveillance and violations of free speech and all that, of course, as I'm sure you are well aware, certainly, the First Amendment does not protect specifically a class of people known as journalists. Journalism is not a protected status. It's a constraint. The First Amendment is a constraint against government behavior in general. So how does this law, does it define who is a journalist, or is it more about behaviors that people engaged in acts of journalism, or I guess acts of expression, would face?
So this bill was specifically aimed at journalists, and I should have the specific definition in front of me, but I know that has often, with pieces of legislation like this, been one of the sticking points. Is do we make a broad definition to incorporate as many people as possible, or narrow it? I understand that was some of the objections that some folks had to the bill, but what the Press Act would have done was prevent things like prevent the situation that we may face ourselves under this administration with the guidelines that Attorney General Pam Bondi just put out, opening the door to things like subpoenas subpoenas for things like reporters' phone records, their email records, to their internet service providers, search warrants to try and find out who their sources was. Those are the things that the Press Act by law would have forbidden, whereas now we're waiting to see what the Justice Department is going to do with Attorney General Bondi's memo.
So now that we're here, are there concerns that anything the Trump administration may or may not do will be irreversible, to the point that by the time Democrats take either the White House or Congress, there'll be laws that are hard to repeal?
I'm not sure. I haven't seen any. There was just a bill introduced, I believe, by Representative Smallwell to protect photojournalists and reporters against, I think, physical threats, things like that. So there is still pending legislation that would be very protective to the press. But without a federal shield bill, I think there are plenty of worries from myself and from other press advocates that we're just waiting to see who's going to get the first subpoena. So I think that it's as much about the erosion of norms around things like leak investigations and targeting the press as what's actually on the statute books, which now, because the Press Act didn't pass, is nothing.
Yeah, if they really wanted to get it passed, the time to do it was obviously before Trump took over. You mentioned that there was bipartisan support for it. There are members of the Republican coalition that are concerned about government overreach and free speech. Some in a principled matter, some much more concerned when the people in charge are actually Democrats. So that would have been the time to do it. Now Trump turns everything into a more partisan situation, and so probably like with abortion, it's like if they were really serious about doing it, there was a time to do it, and they just didn't get to it, I guess.
Yeah, here the Press Act had Senator Lindsey Graham as a co-sponsor. Senator Mike Lee of Utah was also very much in support. But then after the election, Trump issued a dictate on either Truth Social or another platform to kill the bill. And that's what happened. So the Democrats, just to talk in terms of points they could have scored, Senate Democratic leadership could have pushed this forward and gotten a bill passed that Trump did not want, but for whatever reason, maybe they prioritized something else. I'm not sure. They didn't do that.
So, Shawn, I guess naturally we'd ask, what's next? What are the steps now? Do you just kind of sit back and watch it all play out, or are there action steps being taken?
I'm not sure about legislative action steps. I'll tell you at the Intercept and at press outlets around the country, we're having conversations about how do we continue to protect our sources and make sure that the leak investigations that Pam Bondi and Tulsi Gabbard and other Trump administration officials have announced recently don't chill our work. We can really only continue doing the investigative reporting and holding the administration to account, as the press has always done. But I think we are just waiting to see which outlet is going to be the target of the subpoena first.
Yeah, we'll all be watching that. Thank you so much, Shawn Musgrave.
Thank you.
Next up, did Dave Portnoy just ruin a college student's life? That's up next.
Barstool founder and millionaire Dave Portnoy has spent his career fighting against cancel culture. Now a college student is accusing Portnoy of exactly that.
Well, this all started with an incident at Portnoy's bar in Philadelphia over the weekend where a picture surfaced of an anti-Semitic sign. Portnoy got pretty fired up about it on X. Let's take a look.
I have been on the trail. Trust me, I've been on the trail. You think I'm gonna put up with this at my bar? So I've been hunting down waitresses, the table who did it, and everything you can name, because I want consequences for actions.
Portnoy went on to say he fired some of his bar staff. Portnoy also named a college student he believed to be responsible for the sign, 21-year-old Mo Khan. Portnoy says the pair agreed Khan would take a trip to Auschwitz to make amends.
Then Portnoy says he rescinded the offer. Khan has now launched a new crusade against Portnoy, and he thinks against cancel culture. Here's what he had to say on Stu Peters, who the Anti-Defamation League has labeled part of the alt-right.
He goes on and reposts something on his Twitter with roughly 4 million followers and a blatant image of my face. He did burn me to the ground. I'm ready to admit it. He burned me to the ground before he could even send us to the trip. So I was just really confused, and that's when I realized that this guy's not a good guy. He just utterly destroyed my life.
Khan has launched a fundraising campaign on Give, Send, Go to help him defend what he's now calling an edgy joke. He says Portnoy owes him restitutions and an apology, and that the Barstool owner exposed himself as a, quote, total fraud, going back on anything he stands for. In response, Portnoy called Khan an anti-Semitic coward and a liar. Harsh words for each other.
A lot going on here,
yeah.
But I am not sympathetic to this student Mo Khan whatsoever. Look, it's a little bit like the Shiloh Hendricks case we discussed earlier this week, the woman who used the slur and started the GoFundMe, where I said that I thought everyone's actions were wrong and bad. I'm not saying Portnoy's actions were exactly good here either. If you're escalating in one of these circumstances, you are always in the wrong. So the decision to do this, to have an anti-Semitic sign in the first place, obviously wrong. The decision to probably go nuclear over it and fire the staff who are confused and just trying to comply with the customer, I think that was probably a bit much as well. But then it's my understanding from this, correct me if I'm wrong or correct me if I don't completely understand the timeline, my understanding is this individual, Mo Khan, then publicized what had happened himself on social media. And then, so that was a stupid idea. And now Portnoy has blown it up even further, and now this guy's blowing it up even further, going on very odd podcasts. So, you know what? They're both seeking attention, and they're both getting it. So, congratulations, but I think it's kind of embarrassing for everybody involved. That's what I would say.
For sure. I think the whole situation was deplorable. Why do that?
Yeah.
But I also think that the person who hates cancel culture cannot be seriously trying to cancel somebody. Because remember, you talked about the same people who are opening themselves up to attacks, like Disney and the company, when it says it's not doing one thing but then does it in another country. Okay, that's literally Portnoy right now. He is the same man that hates cancel culture and said, I'm uncancelable, after multiple videos surfaced of him saying the N-word, which is equal to anti-Semitism because it's racist, right? Well, this is what we're talking about. This is somebody who said the N-word and who doesn't really apologize for it. This is someone who's put a tweet out, a side-by-side with Colin Kaepernick and Osama bin Laden, and said, don't they look alike? That is racist. He said a black man just looks like a terrorist because he thought that they looked alike, and that's what he thought was appropriate to tweet out. So not coming from the person, and the offense that I heard in his voice, I think I should hear the same thing from Colin Kaepernick that saw that tweet go out. You know what I mean? Like, that's the offense, the level that he had, which I understand because that was wrong of Mo Khan to do. But he needs to either figure out how to atone for the nonsense of the long list of stuff that he's done, if this is his new stance, or if he's still sticking with don't cancel anybody, I'm uncancelable, that's a quote from him, then he needs to uncancel Mo Khan and actually bring him on this trip, because I think there's a value when people actually take the time out to learn about other things and cultures, because they might realize that their hate is misguided or the joke is misguided. Because he said that some of the times that he said the N-word were in jest. It's not in jest to any black person that might see that. You might see an enraged video like what he posted coming from somebody who's offended by what he did. And so that's what I mean. Like, it has to be balanced. Like, stick to, if you are like, that's your whole entire what you're about is not being able to be canceled, this is a crazy stance to have right now.
I wasn't aware of a lot of those incidents involving Portnoy. I don't follow him all that closely because I'm not a big sports person.
And I made sure, because I know it can get out of hand. Like, Variety reported on it. It went to the videos. Like, they're just published videos online that maybe friends that are not friends shared. Not really. He said he's uncancelable. That's what he's saying. You can't cancel me. I said it in jest. He's saying it was a joke. What's the joke about it? This guy said it was a joke too, so forgive him. You know, it's like it's a one-to-one situation.
Yeah, fair enough. I think I agree with you that there's something hypocritical about going to the mat to try to cancel or destroy or whatever someone in this circumstance if you yourself have said controversial or things you shouldn't have said, and you kind of make excuses for it, say, I didn't really know what I was saying, I didn't really mean it. And I am, again, someone who wants to show forgiveness in most of these cases, and so that's fine by me, but then, like, you're going to the mat to, destroy this person. Again, both of them are seeking significant amounts of attention for this, so I don't really, I also don't know, what could this person possibly learn from going to visit Auschwitz? You're not aware?
You think it's like virtue signaling?
It's, I'm not going to give them a free trip to Europe. That would not be something I would be paying for. But
when you have 4 million followers and post someone's picture, we saw this back in the day with Lizzo. She got mad at something. I think, don't correct me if I'm wrong. DoorDash, Uber, somebody delivered something or did something wrong. She posted their picture. That's totally different than sending an anti-Semitic sign.
I know, but he called attention to it by posting about it on social media. The student did, right? He posted about it first. So now I agree. I do agree with what you're saying. I used to run into this when I would write about cancel culture on college campuses. Before I was a video commentator for the show, I really wrote a lot for Reason Magazine about cancel culture on university campuses, and I would criticize the actions of students who were like shutting down speakers and doing the things that were happening at Columbia right now that I covered in my monologue. And I would criticize the students, but I didn't want them also to be canceled. I wanted to say their antics are bad and their desire to cancel people is bad, but I don't want to get them
ruin their life at 21.
Right, I don't want to stick death threats on them. So then I kind of developed a practice of not naming them in stories, trying not to call attention to them, just describing who they were. But then it's like, well, if it's the head of the student government, that's kind of a public-facing person. They're not really entitled to privacy whatsoever because they're doing this in public. But also, I don't want to sick a mob on them. I'm trying to discourage mob-like behavior. So these are tricky things.
But on top of that, I am one that believes in the goodness of people. And I think that with a proper learning experience, maybe it doesn't mean give somebody a luxurious trip. I'm sure Portnoy is going to fly first class. Like, I don't know where that he would fly Mo Khan. But, like, it could mean, like, actually taking the time to explain to them why they're wrong. Some people have kid-like mindsets about stuff that they may be ingrained in them, that they learned. And I think there's a learning opportunity when people, like, we have to have a path to atonement if we believe about the good in people. I mean, we've all been wrong, maybe not egregious and racist, but I feel like if somebody just takes the time to sit down with like the NAACP or sit down with these organizations, the Anti-Defamation League, at least they can get some understanding placed with the right person that makes them take a deeper look at what their criticism actually is about.
Yeah, that's basically what I think. I think I would phrase it, not that we're all innately good, but that we're actually all evil and deplorable, and our souls are dark and black.
And you got to pull us out of that.
No, but we're all guilty. We're all culpable. We've all done and said things we regret, that if they'd been recorded and exposed for everyone, we would be humiliated now. And thus, it is in your own self-interest to show a little bit of grace and forgiveness where appropriate when somebody screws up in public.
Unless they're January 6th protesters.
Well,
that's from our earlier conversation.
We talked about it today. No, I would certainly extend that to January 6th protesters, but if you missed that segment today, it was a little spicy. Go back and check it out. That does it for us today, however, on Rising. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any of our content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're now available anywhere you listen to podcasts. See you later.